Hello everyone, welcome to Cherries Red Army and our latest video. We're going to be catching up very soon with former AFC Bournemouth player Joe Partington. We've had him on the channel before and he's been kind enough to come back on again to give us his thoughts on AFC Bournemouth's promotion and the Premier League season ahead, and he's also got a podcast that he's going to tell us about. Now, if you're new to the channel, please do subscribe as we prepare for the Premier League season on YouTube. We need your help. Tell friends, tell family, tell more Bournemouth fans about Cherries Red Army. So do help other fans and help us get more subscribers. Also hit this like button. I can't stress enough how important it is for you to hit the like button. It helps this video grow across YouTube, so please do hit the like button. We also want to get your comments below at the end of this video. We want to know what you think. Tell us a little bit about Joe Partington if you've ever seen him play, and his new podcast that I'm hoping you're going to go away and listen to. This video is sponsored by Aquashine Exteriors, professional jet washing and cleaning services for all your driveways, patios, deckings, roofing, guttering, and much more across Bournemouth, Christchurch and Poole, including Dorset, Wiltshire and Hampshire. You can check Aquashine out. All links available to them are in the description below, including their socials and their website. Please do check out their before and after photos. Some excellent work that they do. And there's also a phone number which you can give them a call for a free quotation. I do advise you give them a call for the services they provide. Please do check them out. Now, I've got Jon Spark, who's also helping me on this chat. We spoke to Joe Partington last year. We're going to talk to him again. Let's get into it. This is a chat with Joe Partington. It's a pleasure to welcome back to the channel former AFC Bournemouth footballer, professional footballer, and the host of the Leave No Doubt podcast, Joe Partington. Great to see you again, Joe. How are you?
I'm very well, thanks, guys. It's good to be back. I enjoyed it first time, so thank you for asking me to come back on. It's my pleasure.
Thanks for taking the time to do it. John, about a year ago, we spoke to Joe Partington, talked about his career, and we talked a bit about Bournemouth going into the Championship season. One promotion later, where has that year gone?
I don't know. It's disappeared completely in front of us. I mean, it's gone a bit slower than the two years a bit faster than the 2 years we all missed due to COVID. But yeah, it's been a pleasure watching AFC Bournemouth this past year. And Joe, you've been keeping yourself pretty busy as well, obviously. You've just started. You've just unveiled, I suppose it was your new podcast, as Kirk said in the start. How did you get involved in setting this up? And what gave you the idea for it?
I've sort of had my eye on doing something like this for a while, really. When I was at Bristol Rovers, I had the idea to create a podcast. I like to listen to them. I obviously enjoy talking about football in all shapes and sizes. So I had the idea of speaking to, but I didn't think there was enough coverage of speaking to people about their actual journeys and the positives, negatives, their genuine opinions, and sort of like the hidden truth behind footballers and what they're doing and how they achieve, maybe how they don't achieve. But unfortunately, as sort of with the rest of my career, I managed to get an ankle injury and had that operated on. So it sort of stopped me in my tracks, really. But I had the conversation with the Bristol Rovers fitness coach at the time. He's a guy called Dan Nisbet, who was really talented sports scientist, and now he sort of works at Swansea City with their first team. And now he's part of something called EPerform, that are a platform that people can go online to and gain access basically to football related content that's going to help improve their game. So that's most likely going to be non-league footballers and guys obviously who don't have the access to the fitness coaches and the nutritionists and that sort of stuff. So people can go obviously there for all this information that's hopefully going to help them. And they wanted a podcast to sit alongside it that was going to almost be what I had spoken about to him previously, which is sort of like real life examples of players making it, possibly not making it, the struggles or hardships that they may find along the way, how they manage to overcome those, and sort of the whole, what you can take out of it is that when you listen to each conversation that I have with a player, what information am I dragging out of them that is going to help you improve your game? And so that's sort of the message. I'm well aware that people who have an interest in football will also want to watch and sort of get an insight into, say, for example, Jack Wilshere's career and what he's done. But I mean, the actual concept is what can we talk about that's going to help other people improve? And he obviously he got involved with this, and he asked me if I would like to do it. And sort of almost all the risk is on him, because I get to host conversations with footballers and enjoy that. So I mean, so far I've been recording them for quite a while. We've got quite a bit of a backlog of conversations to release, and hopefully, obviously, now it has been released. Like you say, it's going to allow me to that reaching out to people to record and stuff might be a little bit easier. Because I'm sure you guys know it's difficult to get people involved and stuff. So hopefully now that they've got something to see and they know that it's real and can understand sort of the message, it might be easier to get good guests on.
So the Leave No Doubt podcast is in connection with EPerform. You've got 4 episodes at the moment out as we speak. We've got Jack Wilshere, Adam Webster, Andre Ayew and Nathan Dyer. I tell you what, let's just have a look at a clip from the trailer on the EPerform YouTube channel now.
My name's Joe Partington, and this, the Leave No Doubt podcast, brought to you by EPerform. I'm currently playing professional football myself and have been for the last 14 years. So to be able to bring you these conversations and information that's going to help you change your game has been such an amazing opportunity for me. The podcast is in association with a brand new business called EPerform, who are doing amazing things in the football community. They've been created by top practitioners in the professional game whose mission it is to help all football players by sharing their knowledge with you. So, what is the Leave No Doubt podcast? Well, if you're an aspiring football player, someone who is already playing, you might be a parent of a player, or you just might have an interest into what elite football looks like from the player's perspective, then this is for you.
So, Joe, I'm getting my teeth really stuck into this. Obviously, the first one I went to check out was Jack Wilshere. He played for Bournemouth. Now, this will reach to different audiences out there, Joe. I mean, I know some players that I've played with that could have become professionals that didn't. It's going to reach out to people that have been in the game and haven't made it. I found a lot of the Jack Wilshere really relatable, in that I know a very good mate of mine. I know that we've spoken off air about this, who had all the talent, should have played a high level of football, didn't want it, told me himself he just didn't have the passion for it and quit at 22. And you just look at it, and I think you've spoken about in other podcasts that there's such a low percentage of youth footballers that actually make it, and it's really, really interesting stuff. Especially the Jack Wilshere one was really interesting to me.
Thank you. I'm glad you think so. I mean, your conversation is ultimately as good as your guess sometimes, I suppose. So his story is obviously awesome. Like, he was a young superstar. Let's have it right, really. But sort of Mika Richards burst onto the scene as a young sort of 16-year-old, and he ended up being a really important player for Arsenal and England. And we all know, obviously, injuries had sort of stopped his rise into probably being one of England's, arguably one of their best ever players. I mean, he sort of was on that path when he was a young guy. So his insight to his experiences and his opinions on his youth career and stuff like that were really incredible. And it's like you say, everybody's journey is different. We all know the people who could have made it. We all know the people in the pub who say that they didn't make it because of this or that. And then on the flip, we know the guys who everybody said, I didn't think he was that good. And they turn out to be superstars because, I mean, therethere's no shortcut really, and there's no secret ingredient. It sort of is hard work. But hard work as a word is, I always found it a bit like a bit flippant, like a little bit like, he worked hard, or like Jack Wilshere made it as a superstar when he was young because he worked hard. But like, I want to know a bit more than that. I want to know, like, what does work hard mean to you? Like, what specifically were you doing? Because anybody can tell a young player that you need to work hard. I mean, that's sort of the obvious. You can't do anything without hard work. But if you get down to detail and specifics about actually how were you living, how were you training, what sort of conversations were you having with people, what was your personality like, what was your attitude like, all these sort of micro ingredients that actually contribute to hard work. are super important. So that's, he actually transpired that really well in a conversation. He sort of delved quite into detail about it, and I was grateful for that.
John, do we respect footballers enough? Because we just think sometimes they're not even human because they're paid too much money, and we come onto reaction videos after Bournemouth lose and they should have won, and do we sometimes not give them enough heart?
Do we ever give them enough heart and treat them as human beings first and foremost? There is definitely a disconnect, I think, that has grown between fans and footballers in terms of the money and the prestige and being someone that seems somewhat unattainable in some degree. Does I feel as though those at the highest level do feel sort of above your average fan, and there's a disconnect there. But they are all people, and they all needed, they all need a strong mentality. They all needed to overcome their own obstacles to reach the peak of where they are. And I think, for me, one of the interesting bits I think about the Jack Wilshere one, I think some of the questions that you ask in your interviews, Joe, is you're right into talking about the hard work, and I think that is something that is maybe even still underestimated in terms of what it takes to reach the peak. But mentality is such a huge thing for me amongst footballers, the ability to bounce back, and for players like Jack Wilshere, and obviously for yourself as well, that suffered significant injuries. Is that mentality is such a fascinating thing to delve into for me in behind what it takes to be a footballer that reaches the peak of their sport?
I think so. I think it's sort of, it's not overlooked by any stretch of the imagination, but it certainly isn't talked about enough. I completely agree with you that almost all footballers at some point in their career will have a knockback or a setback, or somebody's opinion about them might be that they're not good enough, and almost all the players that make it, and I say make it as in like possibly have a career in the game, but even like the guys at the top of the game, the elite superstars, somebody would have told them at one point that they're not good enough or that they don't want them, and that feeling can either, usually in my experience, it can sink. You can sink or swim off the back of that feeling. I know loads of guys who obviously get to a certain age and are talented, and then get told for whatever reason you're not good enough. Like, we're not going to pick you, but you're not going to get a youth team contract at our club or whatever it is, and then they sort of fade away from professional football. And it's easy to. There's an enormous amount of people that want to do it. I look back at it, for me personally, like when I was 15, I was released by Portsmouth, who are my club. I still support them to this day. I was going every week as a kid, and I was devastated. Like in the day after that happened, if as a 15-year-old, if you'd told me, will you have a career in football? I'd have said absolutely not. Like, these guys don't think I'm good enough. Like, how am I ever going to be able to play football when these guys don't think I can do it here? And a week, 2 weeks passed, that frustration of them not picking me and that sort of upset that I had turned into sort of determination to prove someone wrong. And luckily, obviously, Joe Roach at Bournemouth had asked me to go there. And it had, like, obviously looking back, had an incredible impact on my life. But without that rejection, that may not have ever happened. And most footballers that you're talking about mentality, they've had to overcome something, and that's sort of honestly what separates the guys who make a career. And don't get me wrong, like I'm sort of a lower league footballer, but I've managed to play for 14 years. The guys who end up playing as a career and for a life, for a job, can sort of take those knockbacks and overcome them, really. And the guys at the very elite are able to do that like it's not even a thing.
Joe, by the way, Roy Keane might disagree with you that Micah Richard burst on the scene, by the way.
Yeah, I know. I've been watching a video of his that the last couple of days there's been a video about him when he was the Sunderland manager released, and it's actually quite an interesting watch about what he was like as a manager.
Definitely. Also, an interesting lesson for me was the Nathan Dyer. When you look at the players nowadays, they literally got everything on a plate. They get told their stats, how well they're doing. I'm sure they probably get all food on a plate. They're told what to eat, not what to eat. And if I'm right in thinking, Nathan was like, it's not completely for everyone. I know when I've done enough exercise or when I need to do another lap. How much are we moving away from just knowing our own bodies to all of that technology and data coming into play?
I mean, it's enormous now. Even at my level now at Aldershot, obviously Mark Molesley is the manager, and he's sort of trying to put that Bournemouth style onto us. And we're, what we do every day in training is tracked. Everything's written down. Everything's prepared before a training session, so that they know how far you're going to run and how quickly you're going to run it. But I don't think that football is forgetting that everybody's an individual, right? So I think that at the very top of the game, Ronaldo has managed to almost lead the way in that if I can keep my body in physically incredible shape, it's going to help me to achieve incredible things on the pitch. So I think that sort of like elite mind mentality that now guys look at and think like, well, that's it. To have that mentality and to live right and to be fit isn't actually that hard. It's not rocket science, right? So the reason why the game's getting better and the teams in the Premier League and the players are all getting better is because now all this technology and the information about nutrition and psychology and how to recover quickly, what they're doing in pre-season, how fit they're getting, it's just like off the scale. As in, like if you're given the opportunity to obviously play at that level, there's no you can't argue that you're not given the opportunity to to really succeed, because now there's no shortcut really. And so I know he's 37, 38, whatever he is, but he's still sort of like the shining light of football to almost everybody. As in, like if you're not fit, if you don't eat correctly, if you don't try and recover as quickly as you can, then you'll get found out eventually, and you sort of slip away into the part-time and retiring early and all that sort of stuff. So some of the best guys in the game at this moment in time are all 35 over. It's bonkers, really.
More episodes to come then, Joe. Currently got 4 out. I mean, can we disclose any more coming, or is it top secret?
Yeah, no, I don't think it's really top secret, to be honest. I've managed to obviously record quite a few. It started in lockdown, really, when we sort of were able to speak to people. I started traveling around and speaking to different guys, but the guys have wanted to make it perfect. Have wanted to give everybody the correct information. So it took a little bit of a while to get everything ready. So as you can tell, obviously the Wilshere podcast is from when he was at Bournemouth, but the information that he gives you isn't necessarily like we could release that next week and it's still relevant. So I've managed to get some quite good guys on there. We've got some of the Bournemouth guys that that I've played with previously. Sam, I've recorded one with Sam Vokes and that was really good. Obviously, I've spoken to Steve's Cook, which is super interesting because it was just after that he sort of left for Forest. So that was a real insight into how he'd gone from almost first name on a team sheet at Bournemouth to not necessarily being involved, and how again, like that's we're talking about top elite mentality. I know he's my friend, but for whatever reason, Bournemouth didn't really, they weren't interested in him playing. He used that 4 or 5 month period of that he wasn't involved to go to Nottingham Forest in January, and they almost didn't lose a game until they got promoted to the Premier League, and he was heavily involved in that. So that's sort of the difference really between average footballers and the guys who really, when they retire, can look back and say they achieved quite a lot.
Yeah, he did fantastically over there at Forest. He really did help that defence. I mean, except for when he came back to Bournemouth, but that was another different game. So as we moved on to Bournemouth, I suppose it's a good opportunity to sort of talk about how you felt. Well, I mean, say how you felt the season went. We got promoted. It was a success. But looking from the sidelines, obviously you were trying to perform every weekend as well with Bromley. But of what you caught of Bournemouth and Bournemouth games, like what did you think of their style? Obviously, moving on to Scott Parker was different from Tyndall, different from Woodgate, different from Howe, but still trying to be, ball dominant and create opportunities through possession. But the pressing was interesting, the aspect of their game. What did you think of Scott Parker's Bournemouth?
I mean, it was interesting, wasn't it, seeing another take on Bournemouth apart from sort of like any extension of Eddie, because he was such a huge influence on the football club, and even obviously when Tyndall takes over, even if he has his own opinions, it's still an extension ultimately of Eddie. So it was interesting that there was a completely new outlook on the way that the game was going to be played. It was almost a completely new squad, completely new staff, completely new look of the club. So I was super interested to see how that would go. And we sort of predicted in the off season of last season, didn't we, that Bournemouth were going to be this exciting team. They've got like plenty of really young players. The young Jadon Anthony and Zamora both played almost every game all season and were fantastic. And you'd seen sort of that Scott Parker style in his other teams in Fulham, and the way that they got promoted out of the Championship with him before. And that was almost apparent from the word go, really, in that season. And obviously across the course of the season, this just seemed to get better and better, didn't they? They went on that incredible run where they seemed to beat everybody, and quite convincingly. And then when it mattered towards the end of the season, they had a slight little wobble, didn't they? And obviously were people catching them. Forest, for example, almost caught them. But that as well, that January window really helped, because they sort of, the guy in the end who scores the goal that gets the club promoted in Kiefer Moore, it was a January purchase. So I think they played the season really well. I think they managed to get an incredible style of play that put almost everybody they played under pressure. And then, when they got to January and they sort of felt like they knew what they needed to help them get over the line, they managed to do that and ultimately got promoted. So fair play.
I thought that actually applied more pressure, Joe, when we signed 7 players and had a squad of 26, whatever it was.
Yeah.
I had to go back actually and watch our chat last season, because I was confident you said, "Don't worry, lads, I think you're going to have a good season. I'd comfortably say you'll get playoffs." And we were hoping to get playoffs, and you were very confident that promotion was a high chance, and you were right. So I want a prediction out of you later on when I ask you about this season. Talking about young players, and you talk a lot about that in your podcast. We're going to keep coming back to that because I think it's so relevant. And when you look at players needing to take the chance, the pressure on having to take your chance, it was almost like it was Jay-Z and Jadon Anthony automatically came in for that opening game against West Brom because we had no other choice. But once they were in and taking their chances, and Jay-Z was scoring at Bristol City, I think, and Jadon Anthony was adding value and goals against QPR, then you couldn't take them out the team. I mean, how impressed are you with some of those young players, especially Anthony, Jay-Z, Travs, Gav Kilkenny, especially in the unbeaten 15? And I know that you work closely with the academy at some point. Did you see this in some of these players?
Well, like you say, yeah, I'd firstly like to speak about the academy, to be honest, because I have had a real good insight into the sort of the work that the guys do. And I mean, Sean Cooper, as like obviously most Bournemouth fans who've been there for a long time will know, that Coop's never, like, he was always that guy that was, he played different positions. He was a midfielder, a defender, and sometimes he was injured, sometimes he was in. But in terms of intelligence and stuff, I can tell you there's no one really that I played with in my career that had a bigger influence on me in terms of like the game and how to understand the game than what Sean did. So he's now obviously heavily responsible with the young guys that are coming through the first team. Tommy Elphick now obviously works with Coops as well, and below him Alan Connell and sort of Bruce Sarachi, who the pair of them have a massive influence on the under-18s, and Al as well. Obviously, he played in the sort of the League Two era of Bournemouth, and even previous to that, he played much obviously before my time as well, Al. But these guys are just so intelligent about the game and really truly understand what these guys have to do really to make it. Because we're talking about obviously young guys and being given opportunities, but if they're not prepared correctly or they don't understand how hard it is from an early age, then they're never going to get the opportunity anyway. So, massive credit obviously to the football club that must go on the guys that prepare them. But you're right, when they are given the opportunity to play, and more often than not, for any player, that's off the back of somebody else's misfortune. So, when I was a kid, I'd never played if the club wasn't in administration. I obviously spend a lot of time now. Me and Josh McCoy are back in the same team. And me and Josh wouldn't arguably maybe have had careers in the game if the club was in a better financial state and could sign players instead of using the youth team. So we were obviously a benefit of that misfortune. And just like these young guys now, you're saying in the first game of the season there was no one else. they almost had to perform, and I'm sure that the pressure would have been for them, you know, to go in and look like they've been doing it all their career, and they certainly have done. Not, you know, just averagely. They've managed to turn into, you know, to Premier League players, which is pretty incredible, to be honest.
Yeah, absolutely, and not just obviously the first ones that managed to get their names on pretty much consistently on the team sheet for the rest of the season in Zamora and Anthony, but I think the interesting thing for me will be next year in terms of those that aren't really necessarily going to be featuring next season. So obviously Gavin Kilkenny started in that sort of first 15 to 20 games, ended up being dropped out of the team pretty much just because he was the youngster, because you had Pearson, you had Lerma coming back, and Zenowitan Rossi, another one that I think didn't discredit himself at all in centre-back. And obviously he went on loan to Scotland in the second half of the season. And Kilkenny has already gone on loan to Stoke. So what do you see of those players and the like of those youngsters that get their chance and get a bit of a run, but then through no fault of their own, they are not unceremoniously dumped, as it were, but they are pulled out of the limelight completely and have to almost remake their name for themselves, whether it be out on loan or in the reserve team.
It's actually more common than what you'd think, to be honest, that the young players who end up coming into a first team and doing quite well, when the player that they've replaced, who might be injured or unavailable or whatever, obviously, you know, again, we're talking about someone's misfortune that they step into the team. If they step into the team and do well, when that guy comes back, and, you know, it happened with me quite a bit when obviously it was that era of Bournemouth that was so exciting, and obviously we're like staying up in League Two, get promoted, League One, playoffs. The guys were just so good that I only really ever played because somebody else was injured or unavailable to play. And once they were fit, they went straight back in and I came out. So sometimes for a youth, if you're a youth player that makes it a first team, say for example, let's just take Kilkenny, he might go to on loan now. It's to Barnsley, isn't it? Stoke, my mistakes, to Stoke. And he might get seen as the top boy of the club because he's come from obviously a Premier League environment. He just got promoted last year. And the feeling that he's going to get from playing every week and being, you know, like an important player is honestly, it's incredible. So sometimes the young player, like it's very rare that the youth player gets into the first team, becomes the you know, one of the most important players and stays there for the rest of his career. It's like you're saying, the guys come in and then whoever was the first team player gets fit again or becomes available and they get taken out. So it's sometimes you only really understand what it's like to be like a consistent first team player when you leave that environment that you've come through as a kid. So I reckon, you know, the likes of obviously Kilkenny and stuff these loan moves could end up being enormous for them and their careers, really.
When you talk about that type of scenario, the first name that comes to my mind is Jack Stacey from last season, who I thought was brilliant after he had his spell of making mistakes when we had no right backs. And then the minute Smith was 75% fit, you never saw Stacey for the rest of the season. And that, again, can come back to dealing with that mentally and what you're doing with your podcast and having that understanding of what it's like for a footballer. You talked about how important Sean Cooper was, Joe Roach, I know, speaking very highly of at AFC Bournemouth. So if they're doing such a great job, how important is it now, Joe, that we get bricks and mortar down at Camford Magna, get an academy, get some pitches and up our category so we don't lose players up the road?
I mean, it's enormous, isn't it? I think that it's been so difficult for I must obviously stick up for the academy guys. It's been so difficult for them to keep up with the pace of the first team because the rise was just so quick from being a mid-table League One team to being in the Premier League that there was just not enough time, obviously, to not only build the facilities but for the academy to then catch the first team up. I'm not sure what people would expect of a club, but just because your team's in the Premier League doesn't mean that your academy sort of goes along with you step by step, and suddenly they're now sort of with the likes of Southampton, you know, in their facilities and stuff. So I know obviously that the new training ground that's going to host the academy and the first team has sort of been in the works for like years and years really. I know that being promoted to the Premier League again now will sort of aid that happening and that process. So I mean I don't know how far they are down the line with it, but I think I'm almost positive. Well, I know that it's happening and that it will be built at some point, but that's like trying to catch the first team up in terms of academy has been really difficult. But hopefully, obviously, this the Premier League status of the club now, and where the current owners and the manager want to take it, then the academy will be able to sustain a certain level of infrastructure that's only going to benefit obviously young guys sort of going into the first team.
So obviously now Bournemouth are moving on, as you said, into a Premier League season for, interestingly, matching about 6 years in both divisions, a Championship and Premier League for our historically League One and League Two side. As things stand at the moment, there's not been a lot of business done. You've obviously got experience being around a team that got a promotion side, and they're obviously jetted off to Portugal today or yesterday. A bit more exotic, maybe, than your pre-seasons were with with Bournemouth.
Yeah,
Joe?
a little bit. Yeah, we're not really getting the luxury of going to Portugal. However, I would say the weather here at the moment is ridiculous. So, it's not too bad being in this country at the moment.
We did get voted like best beach for quite a few years as well.
Well, I mean, there's not a lot of people that move down to Bournemouth, obviously, to play for the club and end up leaving. A lot of them obviously still stay in the area. So it's one of the best places to live in the world.
Yeah, absolutely. So there's not been, like I said, not been a lot of business done. So the group is very much still the same one at the moment. Obviously, there could well be more people coming in, but a couple of free transfers is just boosting the numbers at the moment. But when you were around the squads when you got promoted with Bournemouth, what was the atmosphere like in sort of that? Because obviously didn't have to be playoffs, unlike when we got ourselves the promotion at Cardiff those years ago. But how long does that euphoria last of that success, and like how much can you push into the following season with that?
I mean, I must start with that. Obviously, in those championship seasons, although I was there, I had no involvement, obviously, on the pitch and stuff. But I was around to see that the individuals and the group grow into what they became. Obviously, like the League One team, there was enough additions, obviously, to make it a really successful championship. But ultimately, when the guys got promoted to the Premier League, obviously, I left, but obviously had a keen eye on it. The team, I was so interested to see how they would start the season, right? And I can't remember where they started the first Premier League season, but I remember that they went to West Ham pretty early on in the season, and Callum Wilson scored a hat-trick, right? And they won that game. And that team was almost the same team that got promoted at Charlton on the last day of the championship, right? So it's really interesting that you say that we haven't had any new players, or that you'd expect we need a load of new players to end up being successful in the Premier League. I mean, if you want to get into Europe, I'd argue, you probably need a lot of new players. But
3 seasons I've given them.
Yeah, the remit is to stay in the Premier League, right? So I don't think there's anything to say that this group of players at the moment will not be able to do that. I think if they played an FA Cup game against every Premier League team last year, they'd beat more than 3 of them. And I think that this current group, obviously, they're getting such a rhythm of winning games. They've got that winning mentality. The manager's obviously got a certain style of play that will have to get adjusted, obviously, because they're going to be playing some really good teams. But I think the whole vibe of the club, really, that obviously we're talking about now and then. But then the club had such a good feeling. The manager, obviously, Eddie had such a good vibe, and he really trusted the players that got promoted from the Championship to go and perform in the Premier League, and they did. The majority have played for the 5 years that they were in it, almost all of them, and managed to, quite successfully for that period of time stay in the Premier League. So I wouldn't be too quick to me personally to think we haven't signed loads of new players, because I mean the opportunity should really lie with the guys who did the work in the Championship to prove themselves in the Premier League, really.
Joe, I'm 40 in 3 years. I want to be going to Club Brugge for a Europa League tie as an away day. That's the dream. But 17th I'll take right now. It's interesting you say that, because I have got an opinion on Bournemouth going into the Premier League. When Eddie did it, I felt we would do quite well. I know we were written off by absolutely everyone, of course we were, but I felt like some of those players probably never expected to ever play Premier League football. And your likes of Simon Francis, who've been written off at Charlton, Mark Hugh, who came to Bournemouth for £100,000, probably saw this as an opportunity to blossom and gave it everything and heart. And I think in that first season, we probably did really well because we just played on ambition and just excitement. My fear this time round is some of those players have already been there. Obviously, I have confidence that Dom Solanke is going to want to take his game to the next level. But are there some players that are going to go out there trying to say, I can live in the Premier League? And it's not about playing with excitement, it's just ability. But then do errors or mistakes or wrong decisions come into that because of the pressure they're under? So I'm trying to get my point across in the fact of, I thought we'd done quite well because the players weren't expected to be there, where some of these players, or half of these players at least, probably should be there.
Yeah, I know what you mean. Sort of the perception of Bournemouth the first time round was that, this is such a miracle story, and small Bournemouth that have always been in League One, League Two should never be in the Premier League. But last season there was an expectation of them actually to be promoted. I sort of get that, but when you look through the team again, obviously like you did, previously, that if the guys who play, obviously Solanke's never had a super successful Premier League career, and everybody's always doubted him. I can almost guarantee you that he's ready to prove everybody wrong. The goalkeeper, who everybody thought like, he's come through the youth team, is he ready? Ended up being arguably the best player in last season in the team, and he's had a sniff of Premier League, and now he's going to want to establish himself as the number one. He's probably going to want to get in the Irish national team, and this is huge for him. You've got the two young lads, obviously, that we've already spoken about, whether or not they start or not, so it's up to the manager, but they're going to want to prove to everybody that they can play. Lloyd Kelly, the captain, is the same. You can go through the whole team. Phil Billing, who's obviously one of Bournemouth's best players, he's going to prove to everybody that he's good enough to play in the Premier League. I think I completely understand what you mean, and the perception of, because everybody expected Bournemouth to get promoted, that they could have this attitude of, we sort of deserve to be here, so you stop working as hard. I'm going to have to agree to disagree with that in some respects, because I look through that team and I see a load of guys again who are just hungry to succeed and to prove people wrong. And watching that, just as a small thing as watching that documentary about Lewis Cook the other day and his injuries, like, he's another guy who he was getting picked for England before he sustained his knee injuries. He's an incredible player, and he's going to want to show everybody that he's sort of able to get back to that level. So I can't guarantee obviously that Bournemouth are going to stay in the Premier League, but I can almost guarantee that the attitude and the mentality is going to be that they've got a lot to prove. And I think that could serve well in the long run, really.
It's funny bringing all the players up that I think you're absolutely right have definitely got something to prove, and all of those are quite young players. I mean, in terms of Lloyd Kelly being the captain, is still 23, I think. He's certainly no older than 24. Solanke, is going to be approaching his prime soon, and then you've got obviously a few other youngsters as well. There's actually not too many sort of older heads, I would say, in this squad. I think Adam Smith and Junior Stanislas are probably the two most senior players, and obviously both of those have been at the club for a while. They know the surroundings, and both have had real injury problems as well between them. What do you see as being, because a lot of pundits, I think, will talk about having wise heads in the dressing room and passing on experience, and that was something Gary Cahill was sort of brought up as, and I think he was very successful in the time that he was there before being dropped out of the team, of being the older head on the pitch. But what would you say that entails as being sort of like the senior members? What do you think is sort of, what are some of the most important things passed on to the younger members of the squad by some of the more senior members? Is it leading by example, or is there specific nuggets of advice that you would always give to a younger player?
Yeah, probably the way that you say that you finish that statement, a combination of the two, really. That young guys want to look up to, naturally will look up to older guys, and I think the junior and obviously Adam Smith, as you've alluded to there. The pair of them aren't just obviously have been Bournemouth players for a long time. They're both incredible players, right? They both proved that they can play in the Premier League. I think obviously Junior's struggled a little bit recently with his injuries, but he's still got that sort of that natural respect from people because of what he's done. And the pair of them are, don't know them ridiculously well anymore, but when obviously I was their teammate, just such good guys, really, who are very humble. And I can imagine that they treat the young guys with a lot of respect, and they're there to sort of, to give them as much insight into the sort of the Premier League and the game, and how they're going to be able to sustain playing at a certain level for a long time. That is it is an important role that obviously the older pros have, but it's I don't think that they're, what I'm trying to get at is it's not like it's the manager will say to them, oh, you need to speak like this to the young players. It's sort of just like a natural process where quite a lot of the young guys now are so talented, and then obviously the mentality to. So really, there's so many young players at the moment, right? The amount of people who want to play football is getting more and more and more every year. So to become one of the best young players, you've got to be exceptional. So most of these guys are exceptional, and their mentality of I want to be the best to get through the youth team or the 23s or to get into the first team, they've already been tested mentally. So you're talking about obviously wise heads and stuff like that, but a lot of guys don't actually need it. They need to obviously be taught about the game, taught about how to maybe channel their emotions and when to be happy, when to be sad, how to react, that sort of stuff. But in terms of their mentality, like young guys these days, the guys who are making their debuts and stuff, they've already been challenged enough to know whether they're going to be able to make it or not, really.
Now, Joe, one of the big unknowns, and we're going to find out very soon, is how Scott Parker's going to attack this Premier League season. He's going to take experience from his time at Fulham. Obviously got relegated, didn't score many goals. We were a team last season that went into a lot of matches expected to win, or at least do very well. We're going to go into a lot of matches this season, maybe as underdogs. Have you ever been in that position where you've maybe played in a team where you've been asked to be on the front foot, go and dominate the game, go and beat them, to now being in a position where you may be asked for 30 minutes to consolidate the team and try and take your chances in counter-attack? Do you expect this Bournemouth side to be asked to do that type of role at times? And how difficult can that be for a footballer to do something that's not natural to them?
I mean, yeah, really difficult. It's I've not really managed to experience it loads because it's sort of the level that I play at, and like going back years and years over to the League One and League Two, there's certain teams that obviously stand out as that they're excellent, but mostly teams beat everyone, right? There's sort of everyone can beat everyone, especially at this National League level. But obviously, speaking about the podcast and speaking about Wilshere, and there's a lot of that where I did say to him, when you go to Arsenal, and obviously you play for Arsenal, you're expected to win every game and play a certain way. When you end up going on loan he went on loan to Bolton, and he obviously came on loan to Bournemouth, and the perception of what's expected is different. How difficult is that to manage? And he said it was incredibly difficult because his mentality, his whole life that he'd grown up with at Arsenal, was that he was expected to win in every game. And now he's obviously been asked to, not that he wasn't expected to win, but he was expected to win in a different way. He was expected to give up possession of the ball. He was expected to sort of defend a little bit deeper and sort of stop attacks in that respect, instead of being the team that are on the front foot and stuff. And that's obviously something that is difficult to predict what Bournemouth do, because they're super talented, but the Premier League is awesome, right? There's a lot of good teams and a lot of like just world-class players. So whether they go and the Bournemouth way that they obviously have created, because this Bournemouth way is new now. It's not sort of Eddie's Bournemouth. It's Scott Parker's Bournemouth. So the Bournemouth way that they went with last year, it's difficult to say really. Can't really predict that they end up having this really super defensive style of play, so they don't concede many goals, because that's sort of not what Bournemouth teams have been based on in recent years, really. So I wouldn't be surprised if, sort of similar to the Eddie era, where concede a lot of goals but score a lot of goals, and sometimes you can win a game looking unbelievable, and sometimes you get absolutely spanked.
Yeah.
I'm super interested to see how they go, really.
Now, I know Jon wants to talk a little bit about your football in a moment. He's quite interested to know about your appearance at Wembley. He messaged me actually on the day and said, Joe Partington got on Wembley pitch. You got to check it out. He's going to talk to you about that in a moment.
Okay,
but before
cool.
he talks about that, Joe, I do want to get a prediction out of you because you got it right. You said Bournemouth do well. You said we'd have a high chance of getting promoted. We're going to finish 17th, aren't we, Joe?
I think you might finish higher than 17th by just sort of like, don't get me wrong, I don't think that you guys are going to be in Europe come the year after next, but I don't predict that Bournemouth will come towards the end of the season and be thinking Norwich and sort of that and Watford, like we're absolutely struggling, we can't pick up any points. I think also that the sort of like the strength in numbers of that small Dean Court atmosphere that teams are going to come to and not really a lot of guys have obviously would have been there before, away teams, but there's a lot of strength in that sort of that mentality of that, you're all sort of everyone against the world at Bournemouth can be super successful. So I mean, I see them staying up, but I don't see them really, really struggling.
We're staying up, guys. We're staying up. Joe Partington gets it right. He did last year anyway.
Yeah, I got lucky last year.
Jon, over to you. We're going to talk a little bit about Joe Partington because he is playing football this season.
Yes, indeed. For a different club now. Obviously, had your 1 year at Bromley, and now going to be signing on with Aldershot. We'll move on to Aldershot, Mark Molesley in a bit. But for now, obviously, it was a decent year at Bromley, certainly, with obviously one massive success for the season. And before anything else, what was it like playing at Wembley? Because that is a privilege that pretty much every football fan would dream of being able to do, regardless of the level, regardless of whether it's a playoff final, an FA Cup final, or as in your case, an FA Trophy final. So what was it like?
Yeah, I mean, one of the sort of best experiences of my life, to be honest. I mean, it had the potential of being the worst because I'd sort of my whole sort of like I've spoken to this, about this sort of to enough people, probably even to you guys last year. Really, is that I've been involved in obviously football for a long time and I managed to play at a sort of an average level. But when the teams that I've been at have been successful, and that's mostly really Bournemouth, I wasn't really a part of that. I never really had that moment where. I was there and I was a player and I was sort of had a squad number and stuff, but I wasn't on the pitch all the time and I wasn't really heavily involved in all the games and stuff. So I never really claimed promotions as my own. So this FA Trophy actually, my season with Bromley last year, I've left now, so I can speak about it honestly. They had a certain style of playing, and there was a guy who played in my position who was 6'7", and I just couldn't compete with his height and his physicality, and we set up everything from set pieces, and he was great at that. He was great defensively, and that's the way that the way that obviously the manager wanted to go. And at 6'3", I was somehow too small to play in that position. So
I don't know what I am then.
It was sort of bonkers, and I never couldn't really get my head around it. But these FA Trophy games, to us. And obviously that level is the one genuine opportunity you really get to play at Wembley, right? So, and those games from the start were like, the lads who, it's maybe like the League Cup to Bournemouth, like, the lads who haven't been getting a game will play. So I ended up playing in all these FA Trophy games. We went to Dover with the kids and we won. We went to Aldershot, where I'm at now, and sort of had a bit of a max team of sort of young guys and guys who were involved and myself, who had obviously not been playing as much as what I wanted to. And we sort of just kept winning, obviously bit by bit, obviously in these rounds in the FA Trophy. And out of nowhere, like we're sort of in a semi-final against York, and I've managed to play in every game up until this point. And we played York, we were 1-0 down after about a minute, so everybody's thinking, here we go, like this whole Wembley dream's going to be over. We managed to win that game 2-3-1 in the end, which was great. It was an amazing day. And then getting closer and closer to the final, we're obviously playing against Wrexham, who you won't watch much National League, but Wrexham are this team. They've got a guy who throws it from the side to like the opposite side. It's ridiculous. So anywhere on the pitch, this guy's launching the ball into your box. It's very National League style of play in terms of like you get put under pressure from set pieces all over the pitch. So the manager had told me the day before, look, we're super scared of Wrexham's physical and these set pieces, blah blah blah. We're going to go with this, we're going to go with the other lad who's obviously enormous. And I was like, I was gutted, like absolutely devastated. Didn't speak to anybody for about a day. Like I was miserable. I told about 30 people, friends and family, all coming to watch the game. I told them all, like, if I was you, I wouldn't bother coming. Like I'm not playing. The likelihood of a defender getting on the pitch is obviously next to zero. I'd actually planned my best friend's stag do for that weekend because he was getting married in the summer, and I thought that would have been the first weekend after the season had ended. So all my friends had gone to Benidorm, and then they were flying back on the Sunday morning to come to the game. I'd even said to them, like, don't bother. It's there's no point. And obviously this guy gets injured on the 42nd, 43rd minute or whatever it was. I end up coming on the pitch, and not only coming on the pitch, like sort of a nice little ego boost. Like I was involved in the goal that we scored and played pretty well, and sort of with sort of the feeling I had within me and with my family and my friends, that was sort of like almost proved the point as to say that I feel like I should have been involved much more than what I was last year. And it was genuinely like it was so close to being the worst day of my life, because if we'd have won or lost, I wouldn't have been bothered. Like if I didn't play, I'd have been disinterested. And if that's too honest, that I don't really care. But because I played and I was involved, it was awesome, man. It was sort of like one of some of the best moments of my life, to be honest.
You stood up, you took the chance, and you talk about that in a lot of your podcasts.
So even at 32, you can still do it.
So now with Aldershot Town, seems like there's a bit of a Bournemouth theme going on there. I want to know how you didn't get Brett Pittman there, because he's gone to Portchester.
Yeah.
Was that move always on the cards then, or was what happened in that Wembley final sort of it was all you were always going to leave, or was it always on the cards?
Yeah, I was thinking about going for a while, to be honest. I was sort of like, I knew I'd signed a deal basically that was like, if you play a certain amount of times, it extends to another year. But I was quite quickly realising that season I wasn't going to do that, so I had a sort of decision to make on what I wanted to do. And it was I was sort of a few months before really the end of the season that I decided that I wasn't going to be there. And I've been close obviously with Moles for a while, so we played against him a couple of times last year. Obviously, I managed to end up scoring a nice free kick at Aldershot that he thanked me for afterwards. So he's an amazing guy, right? Mark Molesley, as most of Bournemouth fans that were sort of supporting the club in that era will know. And he's a super coach as well, just like obviously all the guys that are extensions of Eddie are. Has
he got a point to prove as well, Joe? Obviously, yeah, quite work out Southend. Probably not the right setup for him?
I would say so. I mean, he obviously combined his Bournemouth 23s role with Weymouth and was super successful. He was then obviously given an opportunity at Southend that didn't work out because the state of the club was pretty dire, to be honest. When he went there, he was sort of almost set up to fail, really. And I think that's, sometimes that can be used as an excuse, but the state of Southend during that period was really, really bad. So he will say he has a point to prove. Like I'd argue that he might not. Like I think people know that he's a good coach and that he sort of wants to play a certain style. But he'd probably argue that he does, really, because he's had a couple of years at Weymouth where he's sort of ended up being this really exciting manager who plays a certain style. And then you go to Southend, it might not come off as well as you'd hoped. And now people are maybe looking at him as if to say, like, what sort of manager, what sort of coach, how do you get your teams to play? So I think that Bournemouth link that he's got, obviously through me and Josh and a couple of the like Ollie Harfield's obviously there now, Tyler Cordner, Corey Jordan, all ex Bournemouth young lads. Tom Perdomo, this manager has sort of got those Bournemouth roots in him as well. So we all sort of know the style in which Moles wants to play. And because me personally, I can't speak on behalf of the others, but I'm sure they'd agree. I'm not just playing now because I like the game and stuff. It'll be really important to me if we're successful or if we play well or Moles ends up obviously being a successful manager, that I've been one of the players that have allowed him to sort of have that, so.
Amazing. I know Corey's brother quite well, Connor, so completely forgot about Corey Jordan. Right back?
Centre back.
Yeah,
centre back.
John, I want you to keep up to date for me throughout the season. You're our stat man on the channel. I'm sure you're going to keep an eye on it. A lot of ex-Bournemouth players in there. Also, potentially for the locals, John, an away day on the international break.
Yeah, non-league day. There's always those periods that you definitely want to bring in as many people as you can, and Aldershot is very definitely Little Bournemouth. With all those names you pumped out, and I was like, oh no, yeah, youth team. Wow, you really do have your little collection over there, as it were. So I definitely. I was keeping across Bromley for pretty much all last season, up until you started sort of dropping away from the playoffs. Okay, it's fine. Oh God, I've forgotten what question I was going to ask.
Wales.
There is that. I will move on to that. Before we move on to that, I was just going to ask about, because you're talking about Bromley was a particular style of play, and obviously non-league has a certain, a reputation that is very much merited about how a lot of number of teams play. And Mark obviously got his reputation going through what he did at Weymouth. And how do you think it's going to be like to try and play the almost kind of like the Bournemouth style, certainly the passing style against a lot of teams that are going to want to play Route 1 and going to want to be quite, direct, as it were.
Yeah, I mean, you've got to be super brave, really, to want to do that, especially at our level, because, I mean, you can probably say if Bournemouth are playing against Cardiff, right, and you think, Cardiff are a direct team, but direct in the Championship and direct in the National League, let me tell you, are really, really different. Like, direct in the National League is like, without a doubt, the ball's in the air for 95% of the game. So you've got to be really brave. You've got to have a manager that really trusts you and sort of drives the message that he wants a certain style to be played, because it's so easy to fight fire with fire sometimes and just think, well, if you're going to do that, we're going to do the same thing. But I think there's you can take a lot from the teams that have been successful in our league the last couple of years, have played a certain style and do play that way. I think in my opinion, it's a more sustainable brand of football. Like you're going to create more chances than you don't playing that way across obviously the course of a season. And Moses managed to create something at Aldershot, or we are creating. We're sort of obviously in pre-season now, but he's sort of creating that style, and we work on it relentlessly every day. To be honest, it's a super intense environment that he's created, but that's obviously again an extension of Bournemouth, and that's what success is built on, is sort of the training ground and stuff. So I mean, it's exciting for all of us, really. It's sort of like almost like a new team, really. So it's it's a good role for me to be involved in, and it's nice obviously that I've got that relationship with the manager now who I'd like to be really successful for. That's sort of not always the case sometimes for players, that they want to. A lot of players will want to just do well for themselves, but if you can sort of add in there that you've got a manager who you respect and you want to do well for them too, then hopefully off the back of that we can sort of become successful.
Really, really enjoyed this, Joe. I just planted a little seed there. We've got a World Cup in our first time in our lifetime coming up in November, stroke December. I'm sure when you were last on, John reminded me as well that you may have played for Wales at youth level. They're going to be there. England's going to be there. Are you on someone's side in November?
No, not really on a side. I've got to be honest that obviously my mum's Welsh, my dad's English. I was born in England. I represented Wales, so I'm not split between the two. Like my loyalties ultimately lie with England, to be honest. But to represent Wales and to have that period of time in my life was awesome. Like it was. Can't lie that it wasn't special. My granddad obviously has passed, but he's like my grandmother's still got the cap in which I was given in the front room, and it's super special for my Welsh family. And when they don't play England, I'm desperate for them to win. But like the England games, it's like in this country when England play in major tournaments, just awesome, man, isn't it? It's like everybody gets together. It's super social. Like the pubs get absolutely rammed, especially that like the Euros experience that we all had. Like I ended up getting a ticket for the semis. I'm just stood in Wembley stood on the chair at the end of the game singing, Sweet Caroline, thinking like this is just absolutely awesome. It was like the best live football experience I've ever had in my life. Like it was. So I mean, I'm sort of excited to find out what watching a World Cup in December is going to be like. It's probably going to be well weird, but I mean, it is exciting. It is exciting for Wales as well, man. Like they've obviously not done that for a while. When they beat Ukraine in that playoff game, I was watching and desperate for them to win, and just to sit like they're a super passionate country, man, who obviously get ridiculously behind the team. So the sort of the scenes and it's like when England or Wales play, the beers start flying, don't they, when people score goals and stuff. So it's going to be incredible. Like genuinely, it's going to be incredible.
You're not the only one, Joe. John is also Kiefer Moore, David Brooks, and Chris Mepham when they're not playing England, aren't you, John?
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's the same. And Ryan Christie as well when he plays for Scotland as well.
Yeah.
Follow them all wherever they go. So yeah, just before we end, just one final question for you from me. Who's your favourite player in the squad at the moment?
My favourite player in the squad. I didn't think I wasn't prepared for that one. Jamal Lowe.
I didn't prepare you to be put on the spot, did I?
Yeah. Jamal Lowe is my favourite player just because of the impact they had at Portsmouth. He played he obviously scored a couple of really important goals at Wembley when Pompey played Sunderland in the Papa John's, whatever trophy it is. So he's given me an incredible moment in my life just celebrating those goals. So I hope that he's involved. And again, like we talk about these podcasts and journeys and stuff like that. 4 or 5 years ago, that guy was playing in National League South. Like his rise to hopefully a Premier League appearance, if any young guy who's playing in the National League South can relate to anybody, just look at that guy and see what he's managed to do.
That is a very interesting shout there from Joe Partington. There you go, Jams. You got a good shout out there. We hope you've enjoyed this video. Please do hit the like button, subscribe if you're new to the channel. Get your thoughts below in the comments. As I said, all the details for Joe's Leave No Doubt podcast in connection with EPerform will be in the description. All the links take you to the podcast and the YouTube videos. Definitely check them out, and we'll have more content coming. Thank you to our supporter members for all your support. It enables us to have conversations with the likes of Joe Partington and many more and deliver this content. And thank you to our sponsors, Aquashine Exteriors. Joe, we wish you all the best for the season ahead with Mark Molesley, Aldershot, all your Bournemouth buddies. We're wishing you some good time on the pitch, and good luck with the rest of the podcast. I'm especially looking forward to the Steve Cook one coming out.
Yeah.
Definitely looking forward to that.
Yeah, that'd be great. That'd be really good. But no, thank you guys. That was a pleasure again. Love coming on. It's great.
John, really enjoyed it. I'm sure you did as well.
Oh, absolutely. It's a pleasure again. It was almost like a catch up after a year's year not seeing each other. But look forward to, hey, you get another project, another team. Maybe we'll see you again in a year.
Yeah, well, I mean, if my prediction's correct, I'm going to have to come back on next pre-season again.
100% going to hold you to it. Brilliant. Well, thank you for checking out this video. Make sure you hit notification bell for more content. Thank you to Joe. Thank you to John. We will see you on the next one. Make sure you check out Joe for Aldershot this season. Up the cherries.